some black women have to abide by other people's beauty standards. I think, again, when you know who you are and you can define yourself, you don't let others define you. You don't need perms. You don't need to wear certain types of makeup. You know, we are who we are, and if people are going to accept us in the workforce, it should be based on our professionalism.
There's like a mainstream, quote-unquote, American look. It all depends on the type of environment that you work in, but like in corporate America, most definitely you have to have a certain type of look that's more mainstream.
And welcome back, everybody, to BETJ's My Two Cents. I'm Jennifer Lewis Hall, and joining me are my fantastic co-hosts, Stacey Ann Chin, Crystal McCreary Anthony, and our special guest, Esther Armah. Hey there, Esther.
Hello. Hey.
A top women's magazine reportedly made some comments to a group of lawyers about what is politically correct, so to speak, what is acceptable. That perhaps afros are a no-no, dreadlocks dreadful, and that political hair is out. But just the fact that those statements are even reportedly being made, do we have to conform to what would be sort of an American ideal?
Well, unfortunately, with some jobs on air, I mean, we were talking, and that's what they look at. You know, it's not right. It's not what I would condone for my daughter, who does wear an afro to school oftentimes, and has been criticized by some of the students in her school, like, what's wrong with your hair? But that doesn't stop me from trying to reinforce that your hair is gorgeous. You know, it's just because it's not straight or looking this way or the other doesn't mean that you shouldn't be proud of who you are. However, when you're trying to get a job that has certain requirements, oftentimes on-air positions have things within the contract that state your appearance has to be X, Y, Z.
I know that being a news journalist, I've never had pressure to change my hair, but I've always felt like I couldn't go on camera wearing braids. I couldn't go on camera wearing a hairstyle that was, you know, overly extravagant or fancy. You do feel the pressure.
Well, let's be honest, what they consider to be ethnic, on one hand, which we all know is subjective. I mean, I even had a girlfriend who was on a national evening show that one time she wore her hair back actually in a ponytail, and it wasn't anything ethnic about it, but they had an issue with the way her forehead looked and people writing in. You know, I mean, the whole issue of hair, particularly for African American women, becomes this complex discussion that's fraught with, you know, perceptions of people who...
And racism.
Right.
You know.
I think when you're talking about what is appropriate, and if comments are really made by any national magazine or any place else, it says, number one, that an afro is a no-no, and that political hairstyles are inappropriate.
Well,
I find that to be...
Well, if we pull the lens back again and look at the world in which we live in, you know, this television business is being marketed to a white audience, to a large white audience, or to an audience that is that has internalized racism. So lots of women, I mean, I know that lots of women say to me, I mean, my hair is usually in an afro, you know, but lots of women say to me, oh, you can get away with that hairstyle because you're light-skinned. All the time. Or because your hair is a little softer than, you know, than my hair. And in some ways, those things are true because of the racist world in which we live.
But look at all the young ladies now who are black and white that wear braids, and people who lock their hair who are white or wear dreads. And it's interesting to me that, is that appropriate then? Or is it just the rules of engagement in a law firm or in certain environments? It's not acceptable for anyone.
I think it is changing, though. Don't you think it's changing, I mean, to a large extent?
I think it's definitely changing in some elements. I think that the real issue with this magazine saying what it said is it feeds into an issue that exists that's very deep-rooted in our own community. The politics of hair in our own community is a huge issue. Who has the good hair? Who has the, you know what I mean? That's an issue.
You mean going back to the good hair, bad hair?
All goes right back to all of that. So the fact that they would pick up on that, it comes back to the whole issue of the what's within our community that's imposed upon from another community, and then it gets into this huge mix and issues. There's no question that it's changing, because I remember being in London, and I come from a news journalist background, and I remember working for a major broadcaster, and we were going through the process of auditions to be on camera, and I had braids at the time, and I'd always worn braids or something that people would describe or define as natural, and you had to have this whole list of qualifications in order to try out, and then to move on to the next stage, which was essentially being developed to be able to be, you know, on air all the time, or to be a panelist or that kind of thing. And so they looked at, you know, you had to have You have to be trained as a journalist. You have to study it. You have to do certain
But should we
programs. All the different
conform
things.
Should we conform these days and times?
But the issue comes down to if you don't and you don't get the work,
Yeah.
it's like how badly do you want the work and what are you prepared to do to get it? It's always about what are you willing to do to get the work. Because the reality is not only do you know you have to conform, you know it. You know what I mean? Like you said, you don't feel any pressure. You know what you have to do.
I absolutely knew that if I wore braids on vacation, I was ripping them out on a Sunday night. You know, when half your head is out and the other half is in, you know, that's not a good look. You need some kind of look. But that's the thing. It was like, I got to get these out by tomorrow morning because it will not fly.
But, you know, I mean, my grandmother just recently passed away, and you talk about the politics of hair, and this is not corporate America or corporate Jamaica. I went home for the funeral, and I had to look in the mirror on that day with my afro and say to myself, okay, do you want to make a wave at the funeral and have everybody be upset with you wearing this afro for this funeral that you're going to walk up to the podium and speak?
Who was going to be upset?
Family members, you know.
Because the hair wasn't formally done. It wasn't done.
I don't think that it would be like a kind of overt upset because, you know, I live my life and I wear my afro and everybody kind of knows that. But I don't know if in that kind of sober space where we're talking about my grandmother's life and I'm going to make a speech. And so it depends on what it is. As you said, it really comes back to what you want to do. Absolutely. So in that moment where we were saying goodbye to my grandmother, I knew that I didn't want to create that kind of political wave. I wanted to have the event go on and I wanted to say what I had to say and not kind of agitate the relationship between me and the rest of my family. So I pulled my hair back in a ponytail.
And just to pick up on that, I had the same thing. My father died late last year. He was buried this year. I'm West African, so I go home to Ghana. And there was a whole conversation about the fact that I have twists and that my hair dyed blonde. And so I did the same thing. I woke up that morning, I thought, you know what? I don't want, and I had to make a speech in church. So I said, I'm just going to wrap my hair, which a lot of women do. There's a traditional, there's a whole cultural dress for when somebody when somebody dies, and you have to have your cloth made and all this kind of stuff. We all had our cloth made. And I said, you know what? I did the same thing. I said, I'm just going to wrap it completely.
And that's a decision you make because
absolutely.
And when you do your job, you make a decision based on how badly do you need this job, how many mouths you need to feed. So I don't think that I don't think that black women have the power to make the decision about whether they can wear their hair or not.
But you know what? I think that in some circles,
I should say in some instances, and instances around economics.
That's a personal family situation.
You know, well, I'm not talking about family. I'm talking about like in
family.
corporate.
I think in the corporate world, the reason it becomes okay is because black women make the choice to conform. And once you make the choice to conform, then a setup exists between different types of women about, well, this person's wearing this style, so why can't you go along with that? But there's always the power to make a change because that's how change occurs.
I mean, I agree with you. I'm just saying that some women, and in fact women I know and who are close to me, say to me they don't have that choice because if they make the choice, they risk losing their job, and their job feeds 2 kids at home and like 2 people in Jamaica.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
And that makes sense. I mean, when I was practicing law in a corporate environment, there were not any African-American women in that law firm who had twists, who had braids. Maybe there was a woman who had an afro. Maybe there was a woman there. But it was well coiffed, it was neat, however we're going to describe it, but there's definitely a negative perception.
There's a stigma attached to it, and that stigma has to be, you know, you have to assess that stigma and decide how you're going to deal with it.
Well, great topics. I just think that hopefully now, though, we have more choices personally than we ever have had before.